So my last book of the year, 2023, is Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. So what's fascinating about this book, what sort of got me into it, is that it's the words of someone from 2,000 years ago. Like, maybe we kind of take that for granted, that we have writing from the Roman imperial period, but just the fact that this is, it's sort of a diary in a way of this guy's thoughts and feelings from almost 2,000 years ago. And it's just incredible that that has survived and has come along to us throughout history and survived to this day. And it's even more interesting or impressive because he never wanted these to be published. He didn't write this, as far as we know, for anyone. He wrote it for himself. This was just sort of his own daily, or not daily, but his own writings that he wrote addressed to himself. No one was meant to see them but himself, like a very personal diary. And how that, after his death, managed to get salvaged and saved and carried on over the millennia is just incredible. So yeah, so this is Marcus Aurelius's, it's called his Meditations or his writings. It's just stuff he would jot down, notes to himself, a lot of them about life and his philosophy, his Stoic philosophy. And it's really neat because it's not a philosophical text written by someone, not to throw Plato under the bus, but written like Plato's Republic, where it's written with an audience in mind, trying to convince them of a certain viewpoint or trying to express ideas in a certain way. This is written for him, by him. Like, it, you can see sort of the struggles and the stuff he deals with on an everyday basis. He isn't telling someone from sort of the high ivory tower, yes, I've solved philosophy and life and death and everything, and this is how you act to get through it. No, he's writing down to himself solutions to problems that he has, and how he's suggesting to himself, this is how we have to get through this. This is how we have to deal with this. So just about everything he writes about, you can see that that's something that he's struggling with, he's thinking with, like death and the loss of a child, and dealing with other people and people who don't like you, and pleasure and pain, and fame and fortune, and all this stuff that he has to deal with on a daily basis, and all the struggles, and sort of, you can almost feel the how questioning he is of all of this in the way that he's writing to himself. I hope that makes sense, but it's very interesting to see that sort of, not, I don't think subtext is the word, but to see the person through the text is just fascinating. So a lot of what he writes about is death. I've got notes here. So he says to be ready and accepting of death. Like, he must be constantly thinking about death, because so much in this is that death is coming, death is going to happen, and he says, like, death is just a natural part of life and of existence in the universe, and it's going to happen. So just, there's no sense in worrying about it. It's inevitable. Once you're dead, you're not going to be worrying about death, because it will have already happened. So why are we worrying about something that once it happens we will no longer be worrying about it? So take whatever life throws at you, it is what it is. Railing against it, worrying about it, profits you nothing. So that's another note I've written. He's very much not live in the moment, but whatever happened in the past doesn't matter, because it's the past. Whatever's going to happen in the future, we have no control over, and we have no idea what's going to happen in the future, so there's no sense in worrying about that either. We should just sort of be grounded in reality, in the present. And he always says that there's either sort of the universe operates by either two mechanisms. One is the gods, or the whole, or the universe. There is some sort of supernatural being or force or something, providence, controlling everything, and if that universe is ordered in that way and set out in that way, then the course of history and the events that happen are sort of predestined and are meant to happen. So there's no sense in worrying about them or railing against them if something happens that you don't like, because it was meant to happen in the grand scheme of things. He's always thinking in the grand scheme of things. What is better for the whole, capital W, not what is better for the individual, because the individual is transient and ephemeral, but the whole is eternal. So if that's the case, then there's no sense in worrying about anything, because whatever happens will happen. The second option is that there is no sort of ordering force in the universe, and it's all just molecules and atoms. I think atoms is the word he uses. Just in a random arrangement, just chaos. And in that case, it's the same again. There's no sense in worrying about anything, because there's no grand scheme, there's no grand plan, so whatever happens will happen, and it's just all completely random, and there's no point to it, so there's no sense in worrying about it. So I don't know if I'm reading into this with what knowledge I have now, but I'm reading into it. He's very much saying, in my mind, existentialism versus essentialism. He's sort of laying those two out and not picking a side, although he does lean towards the essentialism heavily, but he's still saying, like, what if there is no point or reason to any of this? And logically, it's sort of the same thing. He comes to the same conclusion based on whatever premise is actually true. The conclusion is the same, that, all we can do is focus on our minds, our directing minds. We have an intelligence and a soul, and we can only focus on that, not on the body, not on pleasure and sensation, but on the rational mind, and doing what is just, what is right, and what is good. And if someone does us wrong, then we can't be mad at them, because maybe they think they're doing something right. Or if they know they're doing something wrong, then we should pity them, because they're going against what their rational mind's telling them. And so it's not so much a turn the other cheek as it is more of a don't let other people get to you. Pity them, aid them if you can, try to correct them, or otherwise have nothing to do with them, and don't even worry about it. It's a very, very interesting. So humans have two aspects, the animal and the divine. Embrace the divine, and by divine he means rationality and mind, and reject the animal, sensation and pleasure. So very much don't seek out pleasure. There's no point to it. It doesn't aid you. It's sort of the animal in you, when you should be focusing on the divine, because we are the only creatures that have this divine rational mind. Another thing he says is that there is a hierarchy to it. The irrational, so the animal, is subservient to the rational. So the lower is always subservient to the higher. But there is no hierarchy within humanity that he espouses in these writings. It is only that the rational serve each other. So it's a social serving. So the lower serves the higher, but when it comes to humans, we serve each other, and we're working towards this sort of unified whole, this sort of a civic duty, but on a universal scale, but also on a civic and a social scale. Retreat within your mind. So that's another thing, is he's like, nothing can hurt you, no physical pain. The only way external things can get to your mind is if you let them into your mind. Physical pain is just the body feeling pain. It's not you feeling pain. You only feel pain if you let it feel pain. And likewise, any other sort of pain or discomfort or whatever is your choice to let that in. And you can retreat within your mind. And that is, he says, like, people go on holidays to retreats to get away. He says, well, we have our minds that we control over and are us. And we can retreat within them whenever we like and have our own refuge, completely safe and cut off from the external world. So that was interesting. Yeah, things are eternal, or things that are external cannot touch your mind. They only cause anxieties that you can control. So you can choose to be anxious and have anxieties about stuff. And you can also choose not to. So it's all up to you. Another very interesting thing is he says, like, the universe is so very big and we are so very small. Like, I don't know enough about Iron Age astronomy, but he seems to have the same view of the universe as we do, that we are that pale blue dot, like Carl Sagan said. Like he says, Marcus Aurelius says, to sort of take yourself out into the stars, and if you're in the stars and you look back at Earth, it's just a tiny little speck of nothing in the sort of the grand cosmos. So, like, why bother worrying about anything if we're so small and insignificant? And that's just our planet that is small and insignificant. So the individual on that planet is even more insignificant. Not to mention the time aspect, the sort of the very ephemeral snap of a finger and you're gone. So life is not worth worrying about. So that goes back to talking about death, and it's interesting because he says he references historical figures, and he says they all lived their lives and they're all gone now, and it doesn't matter. And how many other people have lived their lives and are gone and no one remembers them, and how that eventually no one will remember him, which is ironic considering that we still remember him this long into the future. So I think he says it once, 3,000 years into the future, which we're not quite there yet, but I think 3,000 years from when he wrote this, people will still be reading it, which is interesting. But he says, like, it's true. Maybe it's not true because he was an emperor of a continent-spanning empire, multiple continent. But for most people, we exist, we die, people remember us, the people who remembered us die, and then we cease to exist for a second time. And that will happen to everyone, even emperors at some point. Something I'm sure will happen with humanity, the species, something, and not everyone will be remembered eternally. But yeah, it's very, very interesting, his thoughts on death. Change. Everything changes. Nothing is permanent. All will pass and fade away eventually. So, yeah, he sees the entire universe as constantly changing, but constantly renewing itself. Each season, new plants are grown. Each year, new children are born, and that sort of keeps everything young and fresh. And we shouldn't rail against change, because change is inevitable. Change is the nature of the universe. Things are going to change, and by change that means pass away, so that old things will pass away, so that new things can come into being. And just accept that and acknowledge that is meant to be, because that is how the universe works. So there's no point in being upset about that. Life is too short to worry about things you have no control over. That's kind of speaks for itself. Use obstacles in life as raw material to solve problems. This one was kind of interesting. I don't know if I can fully explain it, but he says if you come up against an obstacle in your life, don't see that as an obstacle and get upset. See that, try and find a way to use that to your advantage, that obstacle. Turn that obstacle into something that you can use to further your goals, or something to that effect. Don't get upset with people, try to understand them, pity them, and recognize where they're coming from. Yeah, so I said that. So yeah, like a lot of the stuff here he repeats. Not that he repeats himself, but I think it's him building on previous ideas. I don't know the chronology of when he wrote each of these books. There are 12 books. But to me, it seems like these are things he's constantly worrying about. He's worrying about death. He's worrying about how to deal with other people. He's worrying about his place in the universe, his place in his empire, his place in his city, his place in his family. And so he's sort of constantly writing to himself. Not constantly, but he's writing to himself numerous times on how he thinks he should deal with this. And I'm not saying he was the perfect man who had it all solved. I think by writing these things, we can show that these are all things he did not have solved, or at least he had solved in his mind, but he didn't or wasn't able to fully perfect them in his life as he would like to, which I don't think anyone could. No one's perfect. Everyone's human. But yeah, just the fact that we can sort of see the struggles he went to, and maybe even apply some of his solutions, or try to apply them to our lives today, almost 2,000 years after he wrote these. It's just incredible. Just looking back at such a different world. And I love the little hints of talking about pagan rituals, and he mentioned the Christians at one time. And I mean, this was written in. He was born in 121, and he died in 160. Or no, sorry, he died in 180. So this would have been written in the 170s probably. So yeah, such a different world, but still so relatable, and just a fascinating read. Very interesting way to end off the year.